What's up people? I'm here with a kind of different video format than you might normally see from my channel, but I was messing around in the new Snapshot 26 point whatever it is. The numbers are just confusing at this point. But we just got the feature where we can actually make continuous geyser elevators, and so I wanted to go over just a little preview of some tech that hopefully will be useful and won't get patched out. So if you're seeing this in the future and these designs don't work, it'll be pinned in the pinned comment. I really like to do heavily edited videos, but sometimes I like to do some previews of new tech that I think are really interesting to me before it gets out. So here's some cool stuff that I've been working on. So here are 3 geyser elevators that I think will be useful to a lot of different players. This one is kind of a derivative of that. So this is actually the first design I want to showcase, and out of all 3 of them, it's hard for this one to not be my favorite just because it is very simple, very cheap, and it just works. It's very, very easy. And so what we have here is a quartzless and dirt cheap sulfur elevator that is a pretty big improvement over if you were to just have a continuous geyser going in the first place. This little bit of redstone is really nice. And the interesting thing about this is that you'll see everyone actually controlling the dispensers underneath. So pretty much the only designs I've been seeing ever since the snapshot came out is just controlling the dispensers of lava underneath to make these geysers. But there's actually a different way that you can do this without dispensers. Lots of people, myself included, just kind of hate crafting these things, and they're kind of annoying to work with. So there is another solution you can use, and that's what this is using right here. Because if you actually block the water, you can effectively turn off the geyser as well. So if you just push a piston into this water stream where the water can be regenerated, then that means that you'll stop the geyser for a little bit, and then whenever you retract it, the water will go back and then the geyser will be able to turn back on. So you can actually toggle them with the piston like that. Another neat thing I found out is that even a flowing lava source will work for the geyser to activate it. So you can actually just use one lava and you won't need to make more, which is pretty neat for setups with multiple elevators like this, and make it a little bit cheaper. For this design, it's very, very simple. We have the geyser actually running continuously with the piston retracted. Whenever I step on this pressure plate, it'll temporarily stop. And so just that little bit of time is enough to really make this experience a lot easier. Because if I don't have this here, you'll notice that if you kind of come in from the side, you'll get stuck on the edge of this lip a lot of the time, and it's really frustrating trying to get off, and it's kind of difficult. It'll take a little bit. It's just not very pleasing to use. It's kind of annoying. But if you have any pressure plate here, you just walk on and then go up, because that little bit of delay that you get whenever you get pushed up here is enough to make the experience much more user-friendly. And so here I have a version of that for all the different layers of the geyser, and so you can, go up 2 floors if you want to. If you want to make each of these a floor in your base, this is the maximum height here that you can be pushed up with each of these. So you have 5 blocks, which is the max for 1, 11 blocks, which is the max for 2, and 19 blocks, which is the max for 3, and 23 blocks, which is the max for 4. And this applies to all the designs that I'm currently showing you. That is the maximum that I could get on top of a scaffolding on top of here for each of those. And another quick thing about why these 2 blocks are in the same position horizontally is because I have the top water source as this waterlogged scaffolding. So if we just have one water source, we have to use the piston to take that out. So this one has to be one down instead of the highest it could possibly be, and so that's why this one's on the same level as those, and these 2 are kind of staggered. I know it seems a little bit annoying to have these going continuously in your base, but for the build effort, it is really hard to get a functional elevator that is any better than this. But go into my second design here. If we want to have it off and then only activate whenever the player's there, one of the best ways that I found to do this was just with a simple tripwire. This is kind of the intermediate. If you are willing to build a little bit of redstone and you want a little bit more quality of life, this is what I'd recommend. So each of these stops also represents a different floor that you can do. The heights are the same, and this works by just detecting when the player activates the tripwire, and it'll send you up to the corresponding floor, which is pretty simple. So in order for this to happen, we need the pulse for the tripwire to be extended just a little bit whenever the player steps on. Otherwise, it wouldn't be long enough to shoot us all the way to the top on the 3 and 4 high versions over here. And I've seen a lot of people using the 2 comparator pulse extender that's very common for this, and and you can certainly do that, but there's a way to make it quartzless if you want, using this really interesting little burnout pulse extender. I'm sure somebody has made this already, but I have never seen it before, and I actually just kind of developed it as I was doing this. What happens is the tripwire will power this dust from the block above, which will start the torch clock to burn out this torch. And while that is actually happening, this repeater will be fully activated and unpower the pistons, which will make the pistons retract and the water fills back in and shoots you up for that amount of time. So let me show you a quick little demonstration of just how this works. If we toss an item in, you can see that this is activated for a brief amount of time. That is just the perfect amount of length to actually send you up all the way to the top, and you'll see that that item actually went all the way up here and it's waiting for us on top of the scaffolding, and that represents where the player would be. If this redstone makes you uncomfortable, you can put a target block here, but this is cheaper, and for this amount of setup the dust isn't really going to matter. And we're using the same lava setup as before because it's really cheap and it just works. And one thing you might be asking is, what if in your base you don't have your actual base levels on each of these in particular? It becomes kind of annoying if you get shot up into the air on top of a geyser. To get off of the geyser plume, if you will, you don't have hardly any horizontal momentum, and it's really annoying. Say if I wanted to have the floor right here, the geyser would actually shoot me, you know, this height where my feet are right here. And so there'd be this plume that I'm like sitting on top of. And for the duration of the pulse extender, it's a little annoying to kind of sit on top of that plume and wiggle your way down. So in order to prevent that, this is what I was messing around with here. You can just make a really simple little contraption to kind of push yourself off of that, and so that you can actually get off on different places of the platform. At some places it seems like the velocity is a little different, so you have to switch up the order of where the observer is relative to the piston. So if it's above it, you can just have dust right here, and if it's below it, you can just have a little note block, which is a little bit better. And so this actually works on many different levels, and I'm pretty sure that either one of these will work at every single place along this entire length. No, I haven't tested every single place along this length, but I have been able to get it to work every single place that I have done it with one of these configurations. So that's an easy way if you want one of these two designs to stop at any particular place. You can use this little setup to push it out. And the good thing about this is that the steam will actually hide those really well, so you can still use it with this as well. And lastly, I also want to cover what may be the best design if you know how to use it correctly, which is using a Sculk sensor. Typically these things, I like to stay away from them because they're really hard to work with and not really all that useful. If we can use it correctly, it is actually pretty neat in this scenario where you have kind of like an elevator in the middle of a room with nothing else around it. And so what we have is Sculk sensor, and you can either use signal strength 1 or signal strength 2 to read this. I actually prefer signal strength 2. Signal strength 1 will detect the player footsteps, and 2 will detect if the player lands after a jump or if they're splashing. So if you have signal strength 1 and you have like a scaffolding here and you want to detect the player's footsteps, I found that whenever I walked on that scaffolding, it wasn't very reliable in picking up my footsteps the first time as I just walked in here. However, signal strength 2 is very reliable, and as you can see, I'm jumping pretty darn close to this, and it almost never activates unless I'm actually above the water. And the way I would personally just do this is just to walk in here, and it's very reliable to shoot you up, and you're already aligned if you fall into the hole. And that is pretty easy to use, honestly. The platform you're going into, you'll probably want a scaffolding just to make sure that the player doesn't fall back down, and you can do that by just placing another one on the trapdoor. You can hide the other scaffolding if you want to, or just leave it out in the open. It's your choice. And you may think that this wool will get burned by the lava that is inside of there, but these glass blocks that are placed on top of here actually prevent the lava from ever catching on fire any of the wool, and it doesn't reach all the way up here to these. So this is actually completely safe, and it's made with the assumption that this is the lowest level right here that you'll be walking around in your base. If you do want to be underneath this thing, you're going to have to fully encase it in wool in order to not pick up any other signals anywhere else, but it is spam proof. I'm pretty certain it's impossible for this to ever get toggled in the wrong state with the lava bucket. I've been trying to break it as much as I can, and it actually does very well, and it always turns itself off, which is really cool that it's not really breakable. So you don't ever have to worry about the geyser getting in the wrong state, even though it's technically a toggle state. And I know it's a little bit hard to see what's going on in here with the wool, so I've made this version without it just so that you can see that there's really no redstone at all here. I'm actually really happy with how this setup turned out. So you have the comparator with reading 2 levels of the composer for signal strength 2 going into the calibrated Sculk, and that will actually power this dust right here, which will start the torch clock. We're using the same torch clock pulse extender as we did in the other ones, and so that will start this cycle, and that means that this observer will read the rising edge and the falling edge of this repeater whenever it turns on and when it turns off, and so that will toggle the lava whenever it turns on and toggle it off whenever the repeater turns off at the end of the burnout cycle. And you can just observe how that works right here. It's very simple, very easy, and is the perfect amount of time for the geyser to go up. I think it's really easy to recreate all of these designs just by looking at them, but I will include the world download in the description. Just have enough wool down here to where you won't detect it in your base, and you'll be fine for this one. This one, you may need to take a look at the orientation. Just have the lava directly underneath each of the sulfur blocks with the piston right here with the full water streams in front. You'll make sure that the water is on either side of those. And the scaffolding just starts from one block behind and goes onto the hole. And you can use either pressure plate here. I would personally prefer gold in this scenario because you'll be able to see that the gold retracts quicker, which means that you get shot up a little bit quicker, and I just butted that piston, so I'm gonna have to go reset it. Gold is a little bit more convenient because of that, but just know that you can use either pressure plate and it'll work just fine. And for this setup, you'll just want the tripwire over all of your area like so, and you'll want the tripwire connected to this block with the dust underneath, which with the torch clock repeater on 2 delays for all of these, by the way, and the torch here going into all the pistons for this one, and the same lava setup as before. Really easy to recreate all of these. And once again, here are all the levels for the simple setup. And so that's the correct height for each of these if you want to do the exact height. And you can also do the observer setup to stop you at a particular place. Just put a string in front of the observer for where you want to be stopped and it'll push you off. But I just wanted to throw out a few designs that I think will be helpful to people and I think people will want to use, because there's a lot of very poorly made designs of these being circulated, and I wanted to put some good ones out, at least ones that I think are good. This is kind of a different formatted video than I normally do. This is a little bit less edited and more experimental tech. Of course, we're in a snapshot right now, and so this may be subject to change. Because this video is a lot shorter than the ones I normally make, YouTube is probably going to tank my analytics for wanting to do this, so if you would be so kind as to consider liking or subscribing, it would really help out the channel a lot. If you like this video, stay tuned. I'm going to be coming out with a much more nicely edited video for my XP bank, which is the next thing that I'm working on. It's going to take a little while because it's going to be really cool and extensive, so I'm very excited for that to come out, and I will be working on that as we go. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.